Can anyone hear me now? Yeah, it looks like it's fine now. Okay, cool. Slight glitch. So everyone can hear me now, I hope. Excellent. So for those of you who haven't watched my previous video, I spoke about the resistance conference. Okay, good. Thank you for reassuring me. And it's really an important video, important messages were carried out there. But tonight in this live stream, obviously, apart from opening the space up for all of the viewers and subscribers, members, obviously, to join in, participate, and ask any questions. I see some of you are saying they already watched my previous video. That's Karen. Great. Obviously, if you have any questions regarding that, tell me, or any of the recent developments. But I tried to focus it on that because there was a lot of intense information. I tried not to speak about other topics. But obviously, tonight I wanted to talk to you about the dangerous escalation in Israel, and afterwards I will open the space up for you. You can obviously start asking questions and commenting from, if you wouldn't mind highlighting them, so I can try and reach them efficiently afterwards and engage with as many as possible. So Israeli protesters stormed into Benjamin Netanyahu's residence. So just to give you a bit of a background, there were massive protests in Israel ever since this genocide. And one of the most significant protests, by the way, that I spoke about a couple of weeks ago was paragliders, right? Imagine they chose paragliders, like the paragliders that were used on the 7th of October, Israelis, protesters. And they flew over Benjamin Netanyahu's main personal residence in Caesarea. He has another residence in Jerusalem. This was the one that they're protesting with, but they stormed his residence lately. Obviously, they're sending him signals like, why would you go and protest over his house in paragliders? Are you sympathizing with the Palestinian resistance? Are you telling him he's the one to blame? Why did you do that? Couldn't you protest in a different manner? Very valid questions. And this obviously was completely ignored in Israel, the fact that they're using paragliders similar to the ones that Hamas used on the 7th of October. Anyway, they stormed into his residence now, and they managed to force themselves in. They had to go through security to do that. And many people are fuming, especially with the head of the Israeli Shabak, because he is the one who is supporting, he's the one who's in charge of all of his security, basically. So Ronen Bar himself, we had a couple of reports in Israeli media. One of them was in Ynet. They said that Ronen Bar, who arrived at the Prime Minister's residence after thousands surrounded Netanyahu's house, published an unusual reference to the protest. Quote, a deviation from the rules that could lead to injury to secure persons. One minister, Eliyahu, who is part of Otzma Yehudit, this is the party of Itamar Ben Gvir, he was calling him to resign. So Ynet posted, after the clashes last night, obviously they're talking about Tuesday, in the vicinity of Prime Minister residence, Shin Bet Chief Ronen Bar unusually arrived at Netanyahu's house in Jerusalem. Today, Barr published an unusual warning. Quote, "The violent discourse on the internet and some of the scenes we saw tonight in Jerusalem go beyond the accepted rules of protest, harming the ability to maintain public order, may lead to violent friction with the security forces, hindering them from fulfilling their duties and even harming secure persons," according to him. Quote, "There's a clear line between legitimate protest and a violent and illegal protest. This is a worrisome trend that may lead to dangerous areas that should not be reached." At the same time, the political system also referred to the events. The heritage minister, his name is Amichai Eliyahu from Ben Gvir's party. He criticized him, the Shin Bet head, Bar, in a WhatsApp group, by the way, that was later leaked. And he called for his resignation. He said, quote, "The one who has failed and unequivocally guilty of the security disaster, the one who allowed last night's failure to breach the security envelope at the Prime Minister's house, should leave his position and certainly not appoint people in the image of his failure." There was another criticism from the transport minister. Her name is Miri Regev. She said, "Don't say we didn't know, we didn't hear. The responsibility to stop this violent madness, to harm the prime minister and his family, lies with you, security forces. Wake up." So clearly there's friction between the close Netanyahu allies now and the security forces in Israel. They're not happy with them. They want them to take further action. It's like they're already beating people up and imprisoning them. And that's from the Jewish community, of course. Where the Palestinians of Israel have been long punished for showing any sort of sympathy, including, to be fair, some Jewish Israeli people who were imprisoned as well. Some of them are beaten and sent to prison simply for resisting, because it's a police state. You have martial law, really. In the state camp, that's the one that belongs to Benny Gantz, critical chants were heard about the clashes in last night's protests. The chairman of the state camp, Benny Gantz, said that we must not accept the violence from any side. We must not accept ignoring police instructions and breaking barriers, as we saw last night in Jerusalem. A protest is legitimate. The pain is also understandable, but the law and the rules of the game must be respected. We are brothers, one people in one of its difficult moments. We must not go back to the 6th of October, in reference to the division that happened on the 6th of October. Now, let me elaborate slightly. On the 6th of October and before, the protests were about to reach even higher levels. I mean, since the judicial reform plans of Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's seen unprecedented marches and protests that are constant against the judicial reform. Many people started to flee Israel even before the 7th of October. We spoke about the numbers many times, but that started to happen massively during the judicial reform. And Netanyahu, he hoped that he would unite the country in this genocide. He wanted an Israel united in genocide. But that is clearly failing. It's clearly failing. The report continued. Gesher Hili trooper said this morning that the violent protests last night could tear Israel apart. This is another thing, another comment signaling the tear in Israeli society, the massive split, and they're very worried about it, especially during war, during this genocide. Trooper referring to the photos, that's his name, by the way, he's not an actual trooper, referring to the photos from around the prime minister's residence last night, noted that, quote, "Disputes and protests obviously have a place, but the possibility of flooding the streets with hatred in the face of hatred flowing from some of those in power is a very bad possibility." Now, in case some of you haven't seen the videos, they went in with torches and they had Molotovs they were throwing on the police. But some of the organizers, which I will reach to in a sec, they denied that. They said that the government's trying to portray them in a way, and that they've acted in a manner that they didn't act in, and they are abiding by the law, and this is yet another attempt to silence them. The defense minister, Yoav Gallant, he stated on X that he, quote, strongly condemns the acts of violence against the prime minister, even though they didn't reach him, really, just went to his property. Manifestations of violence against the prime minister are serious at any time, especially during wartime. Interfering with the tasks of the Israeli police officers and Shin Bet personnel in these days endangers our security and, more importantly, our unity, which is a condition for our continued existence. Again, another one highlighting the lack of unity. That's the same person who's refusing to sit with Netanyahu. And he had feuds with him, and he even stormed into his office with several of his colleagues, threatening to bring an IDF brigade to implement order that we spoke about a couple of months ago. And yet he's lecturing the people. And note these things, by the way, for our continued existence. Many people in Israel are speaking about our continued existence. They know that they're collapsing. They know exactly what's happening, and they're trying to hide it as much as possible, and their allies are trying to hide it as much as possible. The finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, they continued. He responded also, and he said a couple of things on X as well. Quote, leaving the office after a long day of work promoting racism and the killing and massacring of people. That's his work. Sorry, I had to get that in. And catching up, he continued, on the news with great pain about the violence of the anarchists in Jerusalem. 610 scenes, quoting the days before the 7th of October, and he's calling them anarchists because they are rejecting Benjamin Netanyahu and speaking up against the government in Israel. Tearing the heart and tearing the nation apart. Another member of his party, Simcha Rotman, said throwing a torch on a policeman has nothing to do with the release of the hostages, according to her. Lighting a bonfire in the middle of the road does not advance a deal. Tonight we crossed the red line. The people of Israel are fed up with attempts to divide us. We will not allow anyone to violently take over our country. Again, yet another person speaking about division, lack of unity, and violently taking the country. The only one who's violently taking the country is the prime minister, committing a genocide, obviously, against the Palestinian people, and having brutal powers, brutal policing against the civilians. Now, on the other hand, you had the people who organized the marches and protests. One of them is Moshe Redman, one of the protest leaders, Moshe Redman. He claimed that there was no violence against the policemen last night. And as part of the march, the police set up roadblocks far in front of the house, quote, according to him as well, and contrary to the procedures of the law, he noted. So according to him, this is not according to the law, what they did, the police. The protesting public wanted to get closer so that the prime minister could hear the messages and passed the roadblocks. So to him, they just passed the roadblocks without violence, certainly without attacking the police. If there was violence there, it would be, again, unfortunately, by some police officers who forgot their duty. So he's blaming the police for using violence, which is really what usually happens. They beat people up violently, and they're becoming increasingly more violent and suppressive. He continued, and he ended with, no one really came close to the prime minister's house. No one threatened the prime minister in any way. The poison machine's attempt today to present it as a break-in attempt or something similar is a poor attempt to draw media attention to the fact that the coalition, I'm going on vacation today and so he's saying that Netanyahu is saying, I'm on vacation today while the kidnapped are dying in captivity and the north is facing all of these problems. I'm not sure if Netanyahu is going on holiday, by the way. That's just his claim over there. So that was one of the most intense highlights, really, during this genocide. And the protests are getting more and more violent and bigger. You've had fire being lit next to the Ministry of Defense several times. Increase of, because Netanyahu is not listening to anyone, and people want, obviously, the kidnapped, the prisoners, to go back. And some people are speaking vocally against the genocide. Now we should differentiate between the people in Israel who are protesting against the genocide as a genocide, and the people who are protesting because they're simply against their decision makers' way in dealing with this. There's a difference between them. Some of them call for both. They will say, like, return our people back and end the war. Some will just blatantly say, like, end the genocide because we're committing a genocide. We don't like what happened on the 7th of October, but we don't like what our government is doing. So this was the main thing that I wanted to talk about. Another thing that I wanted to add, by the way, I'll add it later on to the thumbnail so that other viewers can watch it too. Channel 14 in Israel, they had a discussion today. So they invited many people from the military industry, military manufacturing. They had several people speaking about Israel's weapons. So Israel has been worried about arms for a while now, because the US is threatening to use leverage, although they're just considering passing a massive $18 billion deal that we spoke about yesterday. The defense minister went to several factories, right? Arms factories, over 3 months ago now. And he said something at the time, we quoted at the time. He said, this war proved that we need to produce all of our weapons across all of the board. All of our weapons, every single thing. Again, signaling that the supply from the US isn't indefinite and isn't totally unconditional. Regardless of how vile and awful it is, there's no arguing with that. I said many times, the US administration in many ways is worse than Israel because it's the enabler. However, they reiterated the importance of that. And today they continued that discussion on Channel 14 with relevant people from the military industrial complex in Israel, really. One of them was reassuring the host and people, the population in Israel, that we are going down the right way and we are starting to produce more weapons across the board. We don't want to rely on anyone. Another person said something very interesting. And look at the mentality of these people. And these are people in the military industry that the US supports, that your tax money goes to. Okay? If you're in any country that supports Israel, your tax money goes to these people. Listen to what he said. He said, we should arm ourselves and not rely on weapons from the Goyim. Imagine how derogatory that is. Goyim is a reference to the others, right? In their terminology. So he's calling even the US administration that's supporting them with everything, we should arm ourselves and not rely on weapons from the Goyim. Imagine how derogatory that is and how disrespectful and humiliating and arrogant. And this is common, by the way. This person was on live television. Everyone's accepting why what he's saying. No one's challenging him. This is the way they think. Not just with the people they don't like, by the way. It's with the people who are their biggest allies, their biggest supporters. Imagine the mentality of entitlement and arrogance and whatever you want to call it, really. Yet, your tax is going to these people. Why? Because you have a government that bypasses the Congress and bypasses everything and does whatever it wants. Because if they want to do something dodgy, they always have an alleyway, a back route, undemocratic, to say the least, in supporting this genocidal state. Although you have many people increasingly calling to stop arming Israel. Like, for example, here in the UK, I posted on my community tab, Jewish groups in the UK were protesting, calling UK Jews, say, stop arming Israel. Yet the governments, as if no one's listening. We'll do whatever we want, and we'll send the weapons to whoever we want. And what can you do about it? Clearly, what we're doing is not enough. Maybe more action should be taken to stop these people from sending weapons to a criminal entity, mass murdering people on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. Dozens of people get killed by the hour in Gaza. And these were the main things that I wanted to talk to you about, but I'll open the space up for you now. It's your time now to participate, and I'll start reading your comments. And if you're joining us now, welcome. This live stream is for the obviously viewers, members, and subscribers who are welcome to ask questions and participate. If you have anything, just start commenting. I'll get through in a sec. I'll just browse from the beginning, see what you guys had to say. Angela Brody, thank you for your super thanks. How's it going? Great. I hope all is well with you. And as well, John Doe, thank you so much for your generous super. You asked, what do you think the name of the one-state solution state should be? Not Israel, right? Not after what's been going on. What about simply Palestine? What about Sham? What do you think? And welcome to Morocco or Paris anytime, Brother Mahmoud. Thank you so much. If I'm in Morocco or Paris, I will let you know. And thank you very much for this. Well, to me, I always viewed it as a matter of acts rather than words. I am more inclined to focusing on actions rather than words. And my argument was many times previously that if Israel as a state, it didn't occupy Palestine as it did, it did not expel people. People just came in and merged. We already had a multicultural society that was thriving and it was beautiful and lovely. But let's say more Jewish immigrants came from Europe or from whichever part of the world, really, and people from all sorts of backgrounds, and there was a decision to call Palestine Israel. Let's say, for argument's sake, and then I'll get to your answer, but I'm just giving you a bit of a background. And its name was Israel. And you know what? Israel wasn't even a democracy. Israel was a kingdom, right? The kingdom of Israel. And there was a king. And this king was a very just king. He provided equality. And it was like a constitutional monarchy, right? Where you had a bit of democracy, a bit of freedom, albeit it's a kingdom. But it was fair. You had equality in rights, equality in human rights, freedom of movement, accessibility for everything, for everyone, regardless of their ethnic background or religious background. Would we be where we are at the moment? No, we wouldn't. Why? Because people were fine. Because they have equality, they have rights. There's no problem. The problem is a group of people came violently and they formed militias, and they started conducting terrorist activities against the indigenous people and started imposing their will. Pure terrorism. If anyone wants to know what the definition of terrorism means, go back to the early days of Zionism. Obviously, you have many examples of what the US and NATO are doing as well across the world. But that's the definition of terrorism for you, what they've done. Terrorizing people, imposing their will, and changing the name and erasing the history and expelling the people. So by the way, the name Israel on its own, regardless of Israel as a state, I have no problem with it. It's Israel in Arabic. It's the nickname of Prophet Jacob, ancient name. Okay. Now the problem, it's associated with this entity that's committing a genocide. I mean, if we have a solution, how many people would agree to call it Israel, right? Now, not that we in essence have a problem with the name itself. It's about how it's attributed and what's linked to it when you mention it. Now you say Israel, oh my God. Like some people don't like it when I say Israel. They'll tell me, no, say occupied Palestine or something, right? But we're just talking, right? Anyway, So if, let's say, and we will reach that day, by the way, with our ongoing work, this supremacist apartheid entity ended. And we need to open the borders and implement equality for everyone, Jews, Arabs, Muslims, Christians, atheists, everyone, equal rights, right? Like any modern country should be, really. What should we call it? We'll have a referendum. The majority, what do the majority say? Palestine? Palestine. Fine, no problem. If it's not Palestine, look, before Palestine, it was called Canaan. You had the Canaanites. And by the way, there are many historical arguments about the Palestinians being descendants of the Canaanites themselves. Sham, Ard al-Sham, and hell, make it bigger. Open the borders with Lebanon and Syria. Let's make it an even bigger country, right? If they're fine with it. Why not? And then we'll rebuild the historic Levant or Asham. Why not? I personally have no problem. The United State of Israel and Palestine, I don't know. But like I said, the name is less important than the essence, than what actually is there. Like, we don't want a state called Palestine that's ruled by an authoritarian government, for example. Or someone's running it and wants to implement a different type of supremacy. That's definitely something we don't want. That's why I say we focus on the essence rather than the name. How many people speak in politics and have political parties and they'll give you the best slogans in the world? Hello, look at Western governments talking about equality and democracy and freedom and fighting it and doing the complete opposite, right? Am I wrong here? So the thing is, the essence should be what's more important and what's more crucial. So there should be a system implemented where there's rule of law, and that law is equal and as just as possible, because we will never get full justice on this earth, but we can continuously strive to work towards it, reform it, revisit it, rethink things, redo things, undo things, because that's how humanity is. If anyone's expecting this some sort of magic to happen, everything becomes all of a sudden like heaven on earth, that's never going to happen. Ultimate justice is in the hereafter, right? There is no full justice on this earth, but there's something better than something else, right? There's work towards justice, work towards equality. And once these systems are in place and people work towards implementing them, and the authorities are questioned and they don't overstep their powers, you have a very solid split in powers with the judicial, administrative, and legislative bodies in the government. This is how it should be. And the last thing we want is for that not to happen. Let's say if Palestine is liberated tomorrow and we have a country, right? So I think that's my take on that. And obviously, if you have any further elaboration or questions, I'm more than happy to address that. But this is what I think. But that's a very interesting question, though, that I, by the way, addressed in my book, by the way. Okay, let's see what we have. And thank you for everyone joining us now as well. Welcome to the live stream. Is anyone having problems with WhatsApp, by the way? I'm hearing many people's accounts are being blocked. Okay. Jackie Ayub is saying, remember, Mahmoud, I said to Palestine, that I want to take it back to 48. I'm tired of discussing 67. Imagine with all these leaders are talking about. Exactly. I mean, I always said, and I've never been a fan of this two-state solution thing, because it doesn't really reach the core of the problem, which is to do with the refugees, with the right to return, with those who were expelled, and the historical rights of the Palestinians. So the two-state solution on its own would be temporary. But again, and remember why they're promoting this solution: to keep the conflict going. by the way. And this is why, because they planted Israel there to cause division and friction. And to them, the two-state solution would be a temporary fix and an ongoing conflict, which is great if you're an empire, you're a superpower, and you want to control by dividing people. This is what you have, a two-state solution. Why go back? Why make it bigger? You need to divide more and more division. It's not about uniting. It's not about opening borders. Like we live in this day and age, over 100 years ago, what borders did you have? You hardly had any passports. The Ottoman Empire and maybe Switzerland or a couple of other countries had probably some passports just over 100 years ago. People were moving from place to place. It was an open world. Now these borders are created to imprison you and control you. And obviously, if you're a superpower, you want to keep this division going for as long as possible to make it easier for you to control. The Pentagon's foreign policy, that's a policy of the British Empire. This is what they've done. Divide and conquer. Divide and rule. Okay. Let's go to your next comments and questions here. Zach, did you hear that the Israelis fired a sniper into the aid trucks, I think you mean, a few days before? Do you think they were targeting that specific convoy? They're targeting aid in general because they are implementing genocide. So genocide consists of destroying the infrastructure, killing as many people as possible, destroying any elements of life, any basic services, the healthcare system, the education system. Like, did anyone ask why did they destroy all of the universities in Gaza? Why did they destroy all of the hospitals? Why do they even destroy ancient mosques and churches in Gaza? Like that church that they bombed where they killed people seeking refuge in it. That was one of the oldest churches, Eastern Christian churches. And the Al-Masjid Al-Umari Mosque, one of the old, beautiful religious buildings. Why do they target them? Because they want to erase everything. They want to erase everything. The aid coming in, providing the basics for people to barely live, right? Targeting it is another highlight, another definition of this genocide. It's part of the plan. Everything is meticulously planned. Anyone who doesn't think this way is delusional. Everything is meticulous. And you have meticulously planned and obviously malicious and genocidal. So that people don't misquote me here, because I have a lot of people taking one word, not listening to anything else that I have to say and say, oh, you said this, just so I can back myself. Okay? But this is the definition of it. Why did they target the UNRWA? The biggest organization that was established purely for the Palestinian refugees. It was established to address a crisis that Zionism created. Why are they targeting it? Because they know that's the lifeline. And then they'll tell you, we don't want Hamas civil services even distributing the aid. It's not about Hamas. It's about the Palestinian people. We said it from day one. When people were telling you Israel versus Hamas, Hamas started this. It's a front. They're using it as a front to eliminate the Palestinian people. Now, their declared objectives, which they won't reach, by the way, eliminating Hamas, making Gaza not pose a threat to Israel again, and having a regime that is supportive of Israel, right, under Israeli security. That's not going to happen. That's number one. But there are the undeclared and the hidden objectives. The hidden objective is ethnically cleansing Gaza. Why did Egypt, right, despite all of the criticism about Egypt's stance and them still adhering to this aid deal with Rafah border, all of that, totally justifiable. But why did they, from day one, take a harsh stance against ethnically cleansing the Gazans? Because they know that plan existed since the 70s. And it was on the table with the negotiations with the Egyptians before they reached a peace treaty with them in Camp David. They know. They know what they're planning. It's not like they don't know. So Israel had a plan from a very long time ago to ethnically cleanse Gaza. And I reiterate, for those of you who are unaware of it, ethnically cleansing Palestine was through a plan called Dalet. Dalet is D in Hebrew. They had plans A, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. The immigration, stabilization, then strengthening themselves, then occupying, then expelling. So plan Dalet or plan D was ethnically cleansing. They had further plans. Where did these plans go? Did they disappear? No, they remained there in the drawers. And they wanted to keep them there for the relevant moment. The relevant moment came after the 7th of October that they probably had some sort of knowledge about, but they thought we'll take it as an opportunity to unite the nation and eliminate Gaza and have the Ben Gurion Canal and have the gas and completely control everything from the river to the sea. Right? They'll tell you from the river to the sea, Israel is what you'll see. Copying slogans as well. Typical, steal everything. But that's why they target them, because they want to implement genocide. They want to completely ethnically cleanse the Palestinian people. Albertrry, come on now. Do you really think Israel gives a damn about what the USA thinks? No, because they know they have the support coming regardless. They don't care about anything really that anyone says. And they still support them regardless of that, by the way. Like many people, many Christians actually come and tell me, some of the Christians who are opposed to Zionism and Israel state, they will say, I'm not sure why Christians support Israel when they spit next to churches, for example, in Jerusalem, when they destroy, for example, statues of Jesus, peace be upon him, when they bomb ancient churches in Gaza. Why are they taking this stance? They don't realize the manipulation and the indoctrination that happened in promoting these people as God's chosen people, right? And them thinking that it's part of our religion, careless of what they actually believe in terms of you who's supporting them and what they actually do. But more and more people are waking up to this. ABCD, one of the purposes of the attack on the aid convoy was to deflect attention away from the Al-Shifa hospital massacre. Well, they were already supported by mainstream media. What did the mainstream media say about Al-Shifa hospital? Oh, Israel completes operation. Operation, they called it. Not the worst terrorist mass attack on a hospital in history. Can you imagine if a hospital in Tel Aviv was attacked the way Al-Shifa was attacked? What would be the response? What would happen? A hospital in Tel Aviv full of Israelis attacked like Al-Shifa was attacked just because there was someone there that someone else doesn't like. What is this? It was an operation, they'll tell you. So I don't think they need deflection. They really don't care. They just don't want to they don't want it to reach a stage where the public opinion is so badly against them that is starting to affect policymakers, which is what's happening. That's why they are on an offensive, spending billions now on social media, on every single social media platform to promote Zionist propaganda lies and battle and ban and silence anything. I'm not even going to say pro-Palestinian, just pro-truth, freedom of speech, right? They don't want it. And they're careless of what people think really in general, unless it starts to affect them really. And thank you for all of your comments and everyone welcoming as well. Okay. Kate, the Orthodox Jews now must join IGF. Will they protest, or will they now leave occupied Palestine and go back to UK or Brooklyn, New York, USA? Okay, so they're protesting already. They made their threats very clear. They said we will immigrate in masses if the conscription is forced upon us. The government and the establishment in Israel is not stopping the attempts, by the way, and many in the Israeli population are supporting this notion that they should join the army. They don't like the fact that there are some religious people getting state benefits and sitting there just reading holy books. Many people think that way in Israel. But to them, to the religious community, number one, they're against any element of a secular state, because don't forget, in their neighborhoods, in their places where they are in masses, really, in massive numbers, they really live their traditional life. Like you'll see women separately, men separately, everything is by the Torah as they interpret it and believe it, obviously. And to them, Zionism is a secular movement. Many of them don't like Theodor Herzl and speak badly about him. There were reports in Israel about them. Many of them are blatant anti-Zionists as well. Some of them just deal with the state because it happens to be, and we want to get the best of our interests, for example. That's why you'll see many of these ultra-Orthodox Jews in coalition with Netanyahu. Why? Because he constantly promises them he won't step into their conscription territory, into their religious beliefs, and he will try and impose more Shabbat keeping things and on Saturday for there to be no movement, and respecting the Shabbat, for example, which is a Saturday in Hebrew, and pleasing them. But you're at a turning point. You're in a crucial time for the state of Israel. It's worst time, like many people say, in Israel, decision makers, analysts, historians. So they need to take desperate times, require desperate measures. That's why they're spending billions on these Hasbara campaigns. They're doing their best to get this community to support them. And conscription, obviously, and also because you have the normal population they don't want to serve. They don't want to serve for their own purposes. Either some of them morally don't want to serve, but they won't say it, because saying that I morally don't want to serve or refuse to serve in the army will have implications, which include imprisonment, that some people are willing to take, by the way, just to prove a point. And we published some of their stories. I published some of them on my community tab, and you can see some of their stories. But others will have a moral problem with the army, but wouldn't say it's a moral problem, just to avoid punishment. And then you have people with genuine or semi-genuine reasons why they won't go to the army. Mental health. I am, against war in general. I'm a pacifist. I have a disability, and women tend to get away with it a little bit more than men, but more and more people ask for, basically, for them not to go to the army so that they can Go ahead, do something else, but not be conscripted. And that's growing. After this war, obviously, many people fled as well. They fled Israel. So what is the state going to do? It reached a state where Benjamin Netanyahu himself said, we need 7,500 soldiers urgently. Where are you going to get them from? If Israeli reports are saying that 30,000 IDF soldiers are disabled due to the Gaza war, alongside tens of thousands with brain injury, mental health problems, or whatever, and they're still admitting that just a couple of hundred died, by the way. Imagine how bizarre that is. Where are you going to bring them from? You're going to have to continue trying to force the ultra-Orthodox community, but the ultra-Orthodox community is very, very solid on this position. It worked with some of them. Some ultra-Orthodox Jews would go to the army. They'll have their own brigades or units in the army, and you will see them, wearing like kippah and all of these things. So they need to try and continue, but they're in an awful situation. It just highlights how bad the situation is, because they already had a problem with the numbers and the idea. Because Israel is a state, is an army nation. If you're not in the army, you're a reservist. This is how Israel is. So it can't function without the relevant numbers. And now, obviously, it's not just in Gaza. You need to have resources for Lebanon, because they obviously took part. You need to have some resources against the attacks from other states too. And if you're struggling with only this one major front, and let's say the Lebanese front is a front but not fully open per se, right? What are you going to do in an actual case of an open war? It just shows how vulnerable they are, by the way, and how much of a paper tiger they are if they're unable to beat Hamas. What's Hamas in comparison to other movements? Not to undermine, obviously, their capabilities. They advance through time, but like Hezbollah has more capabilities. What about if Iran as a country attacks you? What are you going to do? What are they going to do with tens of thousands of missiles all at once? Or it shows you how weak they are and how vulnerable they are, really. Annie Lyons, thank you very much for your super. Saying that how come there is such a big difference between ultra-Orthodox Jews and right-wing Orthodox? After all, they read the same Torah book. Well, a couple of things. Not all of them refer to the Torah as the book. Some of them refer to the Talmud more than the Torah. And the right-wing religious movement in Israel is called the religious Zionism. So they are religious Zionists. To many in the ultra-Orthodox community, they don't see them as real Jews. And if you see the religious Zionists, like they'll have a kippah on their head, a bit of signals to show that they're Jewish, but all that they focus on is being racist and supremacist. That's their main aim in life. I need to be a racist and show you how you are below me as a human being because I'm the chosen one. You have many, the internet is full of videos showing, them attacking and harassing people and shooting them in the West Bank. This is the mentality of the religious Zionists, right? But now, and obviously the ultra-Orthodox community is more focused on keeping the Torah, practicing religion properly, following all of the religious obligations. There's over 600 religious obligations that the religious Zionists, they're not really concerned about. Like if you want a representation of religious Zionism is Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, the most abhorrently racist figures in Israel. This is what I'm talking about. So this is what they're about, really. Not to say that Zionism doesn't exist in the ultra-Orthodox community, it does, but it's not as prevalent as it is with religious Zionism, who's purely focused on racism. let's go to your next questions and comments. And thank you for everyone commenting. Try and just reach the main things for our viewers who watch this live stream recorded. Zach is saying Israel just deployed the Iron Beam to defend against drones. Do you think this is the defense against their own drones? Well, I think you're referring to the Iron Dome. I'm not sure if you gave it a nickname, but it's activated, the Iron Dome, for specific types of missiles that are not usually the ballistic. Like the ballistic is David's sling, and there's another one too, one or two more. But the Iron Dome, it has a lot of vulnerabilities, by the way. And the resistance identified the vulnerabilities of the Iron Dome, and you have, in many cases, the Iron Dome working against Israeli targets. And during this genocide, and even before, but during this genocide, we had videos from Israelis released primarily on Telegram, because they'll be deleted later on quickly on social media. Iron Dome falling inside of Israeli territories without intercepting anything, going up and falling down. So it's full of faults. Obviously, it's effective in many cases too. No, not denying that. But again, it's about what it intercepts. Jacques Larouche, so clear that Israel is losing militarily, but they have nuclear weapons and Germany gave them additional nuclear capable sub. And what of the Samson doctrine? Opinion on how this ends in this sense? Well, yeah, they have nuclear weapons, but and they threatened to use them against Gaza, like this popped up, by a government minister. His name is Amichai Eliyahu from Ben Gvir's party. He opened up the option that we need to consider nuking Gaza. And he wasn't even like told off, or just a bit of a tap on the shoulder. They didn't take him off the government or whatever. If they want to use nuclear weapons, they're killing themselves. They can't use nuclear against Gaza. The only way they can use nuclear weapons and not affect themselves or try and protect themselves completely is if they use a limited nuclear weapon against Cairo, for example, or Iran, or a country that's far away from them, not within proximity. Regarding the Samson option, basically on me and on my enemies, kill everyone, you're obviously writing your end, right? And obviously what people need to understand is nuclear weapons, although Israel doesn't, they hinted that they have them, obviously, but they're very shady about it. And Israel exposed it in over 30 years ago, Vanunu, when he was kidnapped. But what people need to know is, making a decision to nuke someone, it's not a one-man decision. It's a multi-layered decision. So you need multiple layers of approval up until you reach that button. The only time in history that we know where the possibility of someone using a nuclear weapon and there weren't many layers from the decision making up until that button is during the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union in the 50s. There were reported historical facts from that period that they were about to deploy nuclear weapons accidentally. And obviously you had the nuclear race between them and the Soviet Union at the time. But ever since then, even the United States as a government, as an establishment, they implemented more thorough measures to reach that distance. It's like it's not as if Biden says, "Okay, let's nuke, I don't know, Russia." He can nuke them tomorrow. Or if Netanyahu said, "I want to throw a nuclear bomb on," then that will be. It's a multi-layered thing because it's a very sensitive weapon. It doesn't just depend on you. It has international, global implications, and there's a level of understanding between countries that it's primarily there for deterrence. I mean, Russia and the US both have nuclear capability to destroy the Earth several times. Who wants that? Like, do you want to end humanity? You know, we should be talking about ending wars and reaching solutions, political solutions, and resoluting disputes diplomatically and peacefully rather than through war. But the world that we live in now is run by superpowers who impose their will on other nations who have no other option but to fight back to get their rights. That's the harsh truth. And that's why we have continued wars. Greed. Otherwise, as a human race, we're capable of diplomatically reaching solutions. That's why diplomacy is there in international relations, and war should be really a last resort. But when you have greed, expansion, colonialism, you will have these problems. But I think in terms of Samson, really complete last resort, and they would write their own end. Like, there's an argument now that they're collapsing. So when to them would be the Samson option? Would it be literally as if when the prime minister's office is about to go down, or the government offices are about to be taken over by a hostile movement? However, we do definitely know that they do have the capacity, and they did take action to kill their own people. On the 7th of October, they massacred people in the Nova Festival. We saw the Israeli helicopters recorded. And then we had proof from Israeli pilots who said we didn't have a chain of command. We used to speak about it with each other on a WhatsApp group to dictate what's suitable to attack and what not, that we spoke about just a couple of weeks ago. You had them massacring people in the Israeli kibbutzes in Be'eri particularly, and obviously in the other places. And the Israeli citizens who were in these kibbutzes, they recorded tanks coming in their houses, bombing, just because they suspected that some Hamas members are there, regardless of any Israelis who are there. You heard from the Israeli soldier who I spoke about the, what's it called? Slipped my mind now. Hannibal Directive. They told them in the army about the Hannibal Directive. They tell them if you're kidnapped, if your body's kidnapped, we have to get rid of it. They wouldn't tell them that you're alive. Yet we had stories about people who were targeted in gas bombs during this genocide just to kill leaders in Al-Qassam brigades that Israel had information about, particularly Al-Ghandour. That was in Jabalia, if I'm not mistaken. And the mother of this soldier who was killed alongside two Israeli soldiers, knowingly, Israel knew that they were alive and they were in the tunnel, and they bombed it with a gas bomb to kill them. And his mother remained an activist, spoke vocally about it. I also spoke about it a couple of months back when it happened. It's there. It's there. But those are limited cases. If we're talking about the Samson option, Shamshon, you're talking about a massive deal. And when, how, obviously the days will reveal if we reach that day and if they are still in power to do so, right? Self-destruction, I'll destroy everything around me. But then again, what, are they going to destroy the world? All of the world? Do they have the capacity to do that? Or just Israel? Because then again, okay, if they destroy themselves, all right, they'll eliminate it. It'll be rebuilt later on. I mean, you had nuclear bombs, and, it was rebuilt later on, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. There's long-term consequences, but it can be rebuilt. Okay. Okay, let's see if you have any more questions. Jihad Al-Aidi, thank you so much. Very generous of you for your super. All right, I think that's it. You don't have any more questions. Let me see if I missed something before we wrap up. Tangerine Sky, Israel's probably fine with ending humanity if they can rule over the ashes. That's what they do. I mean, haven't they turned Gaza into rubble and just to control it? This is how they rule, really, on destruction, on genocide. This is how they establish their state. And we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. If you haven't watched my previous video, please go ahead. And apart from that, enjoy the rest of your evening. And I'll see you soon in the next video. Take care.